Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not.
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Andrei Soica, hoping that your day is going well. Whether you live in the States or internationally, wherever you are, whoever you are, I hope you're doing fine for yourself. This is currently the second show of the year 2021 for me. So the cool? Things are getting a wee bit shaky. But you know what? I am dedicated and I'm focused into trying to get into other mixed martial arts organizations, especially those that are outside, the Western states. So I also am trying to get into PFL right now, but I'm waiting for the PFL season to go start over again. And at the time of this recording, there are no Bellator events coming up anytime soon. So I'm focusing in on one championship, Collision Course 1. So last episode, I talked about one championship, Collision Course number 2. And the reason for that was because, I expected that since the event took place on Christmas Day, that they're going to go and unload their huge events on Collision Course number 2. And that didn't really happen. Actually, I would argue that Collision Course number 1 was better than Collision Course number 2 here. And so let's go and discuss one championship, Collision Course 1. First bout of the night here, we have Chan Mathana versus Shea Wei at flyweight. It is an MMA bout here. And one of the cool things about this was the fact that every fight in this entire card was an MMA bout, with the exception being the co-main event and the main event. Co-main event was a title fight for the Bantamweight Muay Thai title, and then for the main event, we had a light heavyweight kickboxing title. So it was actually really good pacing. It really was, because there were moments when I watched other shows for one championship where it's like kickboxing, MMA, Muay Thai, kickboxing, MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, and it's just like, oh my goodness. Like, it kind of is essentially overload for me, and it does take me out in some fights. It really does. And the fact that we're having, specifically a Muay Thai and a kickboxing bout being the final two bouts of the entire night, it really felt special. It really did. It kind of is a novelty. I still how I perceive it, that the Muay Thai and the kickboxing thing is a novelty, and of course it's a novelty for me, being a person who covers strictly mixed martial arts, and also at times I do love discussing boxing, but it kind of is a novelty, and when used like this, how Collision Course 1, how it was presented, it felt good. It didn't feel jarring that we go from one fight that's a wrestling bout, and the second bout is them throwing out kicks, and then someone gets a leg trip in accidentally, and then they don't pursue the ground and pound. So I like the pacing of Collision Course number 1 versus Collision Course number 2. And so, first fight, Charatana versus Shea Wei at flyweight. So this was a battle between Chan's kicks versus Wei's punching. Shea is very aggressive early on. After a minute of clinching, he gets a leg trip in 2 minutes in, and he gets to half guard. He then transitions from half guard to, he attempts to go full, it's half guard to side position. Then he tries to go move himself over to mount, but he struggles to get there, and Chan scrambles out. She gets another takedown in, and I score the fight here that she does win the first round. It was more of a sense of so Shea Wei's, his striking was a lot more better. He overwhelmed Chan, and also Chan, he just didn't do anything really that went out there or was integral or didn't do really much in that first round. It was Shea goes in, hits some hard punches, then shoots in for a takedown, gets 2 leg trip takedowns in, so Shea Wei wins the first round. And then we go to the second round here. Chan starts throwing out leg kicks and gets a clean right hand. At this point here, Chan's strike efficiency is incredibly high. I give second round to Chan. I give to Chan Wathana. Then we move on to the third round here. In the third round, Shea lands a good left hand, does some ground and pound for the victory. So, in this scenario here, we have Shea Wei. He overwhelmed Chan. Second round, Chan overwhelmed Shea. And in the third round here, it was Chan, he carried over the momentum from the second round. He carried over the momentum, and he tried to overwhelm Shea, but Shea was able to go and be a good counterpuncher here, and was able to land a clean left hand, wins the fight via knockout in the third round. Winner of the bout goes for Shea Wei. And then the second bout of the night goes to sorry if I said it wrong correctly. Tatsumitsu Wada versus Yerklau Fairtex. It is a flyweight MMA bout. Now then, this bout here, yikes. I always discuss this whenever it comes to one championship, and even the rulings here don't make too much sense. It really doesn't, because anybody and everybody can look at this fight, and generally, I say 99% of people would agree that Wada should have won this bout. He should have. Wada overwhelmed Fairtex easily in the first round. Second round, Fairtex did better, but Wada just overwhelmed him in the clinching. This entire bout pretty much was Wada pressing forward on Fairtex, putting him on the cage, and clinch working him. And was it the most interesting fight to watch? No, it wasn't. Did he have more control over his opponent than Fairtex? Oh, definitely. Third round, more of the same thing. And it turns out that Fairtex ended up winning the fight by split decision. And you can tell immediately, based on some fighters' faces, when they genuinely felt like they should have won, or they felt like they should have lost. We don't see this that often, but we see fights where, okay, if it was a close bout, then the fighter who loses, they'll be like, oh man, I lost. And then, they clap their hands. They move their head up and down. They're like, you know what? I went out there. I did the best I could. Respect my opponents. I did the best I could. Whatever happens, happens. I accept the decision. That's how it typically usually goes. But in this scenario here, we had Fairtex upon clinch working. Wada is clinch working with Fairtex. Fairtex is getting pummeled. Bell sounds. Wada has his arms up in the air as if, hey, I won. I won the bouts. Good for me. Fairtex, his hands are on his hips. It proper is like, man, I didn't do good there. I didn't do good in that bout. I'm disappointed in myself. Then we get to the decision. Fairtex, he looks upset. Wada, he looks excited. And then we hear, one judge scores it for Fairtex. And then Wada looks up, looks at Fairtex with confusion in his eyes. And Fairtex goes from disappointment in his face to be like, wait, what? No way. He gives that face of like, no way this is actually happening to me. Second judge scored it for Wada. Third judge scored it for Fairtex. Fairtex ended up winning the fight by split decision. Wada is obviously disappointed. Fairtex, like a kid in Christmas who got all his presents after his parents told him, no, you're not getting anything special, raises his arms up in the air and is like, yeah, I did it, woo! Oh man. And he tries, Fairtex goes to Wada, tries to shake his hand, and Wada, he shakes his hand without, he's not even giving eye contact to Fairtex. Fairtex is smiling, Wada shakes his hand, it's like a limp hand, not looking him in the eye, walks away, shakes his head. It's a controversial finish. Even the commentator when talking about it, Mitch was saying, well, that's a decision, but you can really argue that that's not how it should have gone. And yeah, I'm going to say it or not, Tatsumitsu Wada got screwed over. He should have won the fights. Anybody and everybody with eyes could have seen, what aspect of the fight game, and maybe it's one of the annoying things about one championships and how they score fights, because the commentary team always says this. They're always saying, it's so weird, they're always saying these fights the judges are scoring these fights based on accumulation of what they've done over 3 rounds of action, or over 5 rounds of action, if it's a championship bout. And I'm like, okay then, that makes sense. But, wait a minute, if you're judging a fight based on accumulation, if a fighter were to win more rounds over his opponents, wouldn't that mean they won more accumulated, they were winning the fights more accumulatively than their opponents? I'm just saying here. And when you look at every single round in this fight between Wada and Fairtex didn't win a single round. He didn't. Now, here's what I think is going on through the judges' heads here. I think maybe they're rewarding Fairtex for defending himself. Because I'll tell you this right now. Wada, he really wasn't doing much on his opponents. And I said this in the last collision course here, where one championship's rulings don't benefit fighters who are used to winning fights through the scoring system or through controlling their opponents. Because you can grapple, you can wrestle your opponents, and if you don't do any ground and pounding and just pressing them in the ground for the entire time and making them gash or tired out, you're not actually winning anything or doing anything that would go unappeal to the judges. You're not. You can be like Carlos Esparza, double leg takedown their opponents, press them in the ground for the majority of the fights. I mean, we've seen this happen. If you remember, we had Derek Lewis versus Daniel Cormier. You know what happened in that fight? Cormier, double leg takedown, wrestles with Derek Lewis. And here's the thing. If Daniel Cormier were to just wrestle Derek Lewis and keep him on the ground for 5 rounds of action, without even pulling up any striking, without even attempting any submission holds, and Derek Lewis is just there, like stationary, like a, in a vegetative state, not doing anything, with Cormier putting him down. If it was a one championship bout, a judge might be like, you know what? Cormier really didn't do much in that fight. We'll award that round to Lewis. And that's what happened here. Wada took advantage of Fairtex. Fairtex was able to defend himself, but he didn't apply that much offense. Fight stats and the eye test both say that Fairtex should have lost the fights, and the victory should have went towards Tatsumitsu Wada. And then we go to a fight here that was kind of similar in terms of the narrative what was going on here. We had Yusuf Sadulov versus Troy Worthern. This is an MMA bout. And in this bout here, it's weird. These 3 bouts have very similar narratives. And I'm a firm believer that whenever there's a fight that goes to the judges or there's a round going over, there should be some explanation as to why, or something that tells the audience what the perception is of the judges. Because the Tatsumitsu Wada fights, the Yusuf Sadulov fight, and the Gaffarov fight, these 3 fights are similar in the sense that if this were to be conducted in a Bellator ring, or a PFL, or even a UFC octagon, the way how these judges score these fights would be all very different here. Because in Yusuf Sadulov versus Troy Worthern in their MMA bouts, you know what Sadulov did? He went in there, he saw Troy, shoots in for a takedown, controls him via clinch work, presses up on him in the clinching, makes Troy Worthern really work hard into trying to get out of these bad positions, took advantage of the guy, and Sadulov won the fight by unanimous decision. And I'm thinking here right now, why is it that when Wada was controlling his opponents, the judges scored, oh man, you didn't really win. But when Sadulov was controlling his opponents, and Troy Worthern, he was winning. Explain that. And I'll try to explain it in the sense that the difference between Sadulov and his grappling versus Wada's grappling was that Wada's grappling is based on tiring his opponents. Sadulov's grappling is based on a little bit more ground and pound, and he was a lot more active than his opponents. Like, we've seen this happen in a lot of MMA bouts here, and it's one of the things that does bother my friends, in the sense that you can go see, like, one wrestler shoots in for a takedown, and then they're just there on the ground. It's like, one of my friends who doesn't watch MMA, but whenever I try to get him to watch MMA, whenever he sees this scenario happening, he's like, they're not doing anything. The guy's on top, he's not punching him, he's not doing anything, he's just like motionless, he's there, like on top of the guy. And for Yusuf Sadulov, he does what Khabib does, also similar to what Gafurov does, where the second they go for a takedown, they work in an incredibly high pace, high work rate, in that there's no 10 or 15 second time between them not doing anything or working towards a position, not working towards a body part, or not trying to do something that will go and change the states of where they are in the ground. Because Sadullayev, he takes you down, and then something changes in 15 seconds. Wada, he takes you down, nothing changes, but he controls you. And depending on where you fight, what organization you fight, and how the judges see it, then the decision might be different. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after the short break, you're continuing in my discussion of One Championship Collision Course 1. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so I'm discussing One Championship's Collision Course number 1. And so Yusuf Sadullayev versus Troy Worthern. To pretty much summarize this fight here, we have Troy Worthern, who is supposed to be a really good wrestler, versus Sadullayev. And what happened here was Sadullayev, he pushes forward. He is fighting in an incredibly high pace, high work rate. So Sadullayev and Gafurov, these two fighters pretty much fought the same way here, but the way their fight ended off was very questionable in a sense of the decision here. So Yusuf Sadullayev, when he was fighting against Troy Worthern, he would pressure his opponent with a kind of similar to Khabib actually, where he would try to overwhelm his opponent with a high volume of strikes. Then from those high volume of strikes, he then shoots in for a takedown. And what Sadullayev does, different from Tatsumaya Wada, is that he would try to change the state of the states of the grappling every 10 to 15 seconds. And what I mean changing by the state, I mean there are some moments in some of these wrestling matches we see where we see one fighter shooting for a takedown and they're pretty much stuck at guard or at half guard position for about 30-40 seconds, and then they then transition to like a side position, or they go back to half guard, or transition to any other position, and it takes them like another minute. And so the state of the flow of the fight is not constantly changing every 10-15 seconds. It's like half guard, almost a minute later, side control, almost a minute later, back to half guard. And so what Sadullayev does is that it's half guard, 10 to 15 seconds later, side control, 10 to 15 seconds later, pressures him up to cage. 10 to 15 seconds later, he then goes on mount position. And one issue that Sadullayev did, similar to Gafurov, was that because they're overwhelming their opponent through their grappling and through their wrestling, there were moments actually where they tried to rush towards positions, and their opponent was able to maintain a level of energy throughout. What I meant by that, though, was while Wada was grappling with Fairtex was so tired through the grappling of Wada that when it came to the second and third round, Fairtex, when he was wrestling with Wada, really couldn't do much in terms of trying to push him away or trying to get back into a standing position. In this scenario here, it's not allowed because he's rushing himself and getting through all these positions here. It leads to Fairtex never really being exhausted or tired or being really overwhelmed to the point that his cardio is really shaken up or affected, More like, oh snap, this guy takes me down. Okay, I gotta do a whole lot of things in order to get back up again. Now, Saenchaimuaythaigym, he did a good job keeping Troy Worthern onto the ground for the most part of this bout here, but he controlled him so much to the point that he essentially dominated the guy through ground and pound action, and he is so strong, so powerful, that it was nearly impossible not for the judges to go give him the decision. So, Yusuf Saenchaimuaythaigym ended up winning the bout via unanimous decision in the fight. And then we go to our third fight here, Murat Gafurov versus Lowen Tanas. So, this fight, similar to the Troy Worthern and Saenchaimuaythaigym fight, is more of a sense of Gafurov grappling, wrestling him, and similar to the last fight here, his opponent was able to get back up and was able to go scramble and laid in some clean shots onto Gafurov. So, among the three grappling matches we have here with Wada, Fairtex, Saenchaimuaythaigym, Worthern, and Gorthov versus Tyanis, Gafurov, he grappled his opponent and then he didn't keep him onto the ground. He didn't control him enough onto the ground, which led to some openings for Tyanis to go get up and land some clean shots. Saenchaimuaythaigym overwhelmed his opponent but kept him on the ground. Wada just kept him on the ground but really didn't do much in working him. So those are the three very different aspects of grappling that happens in mixed martial arts here. Murat Gafurov was able to win the fight via split decision, which was pretty shocking to me, considering that I think he did enough in each round. But you know what? I always say this. I'm always judging these fights by a per round basis here. And it's not just me. Even the commentary team does this. Even they do this. Where they are judging the fights at a per round basis in every single one of these MMA bouts. They're like, oh, I give fighter A here the victory in this fight because he won the first 2 rounds. Though he did lose the 3rd round. So he won based on accumulation. So I'm thinking right now, what's the point? Why are we having these fights be judged based on accumulation when, logically speaking, in order to judge based on accumulation, you have to go at a per round basis? What the heck? Why? If it's a case where a fighter wins a fight because they're the ones who's dominating their opponent by the end of it, what stops one fighter from being incredibly passive in the first and second round, storing all their energy, and then going all that in the third and final round, and being the one with their arms raised in the end? It's just, there's a lot of consistency issues that pertain to the judges scoring, the ruling of MMA bouts, that it gets incredibly distracting, and at times doesn't make all that much sense. So let's move on to the co-main event, which is Nong-O versus Rodlek. It is a Muay Thai bout for the Muay Thai Bantamweight title, and this one was certainly, I am struggling right now trying to get to kickboxing and Muay Thai, and a huge part of that is because, well, I'm used to the MMA type of scoring and type of fighting. I do watch boxing, but I watch it very sparingly, and I usually only watch boxing when I'm with a huge group of people. Like when I'm a huge group with my friends, we can all watch boxing, get hyped up to it. But when you're watching a one championship event, and most of your friends are not into kickboxing or Muay Thai, or they aren't really involved in the storylines or the characters or any of the narratives that's happening right now for one championship, it gets pretty difficult just watching this on your own. But this was honestly one of the most fun fights of the entire night here. So Nong-O versus Rodlek here. One thing that's difficult for me to comprehend and understand here for Muay Thai is that there's grabbing. There is grabbing in the sense that if a fighter were to go for a body kick, you can go and grab the leg and you can leg trip them, and the fight resets itself. And I'm unsure whether or not the fight resetting even gets the one fighter who got the leg trip in even a score in the first place. That's what I'm unsure about. Also, unlike MMA bouts, Muay Thai bouts are judged in a per round basis. And I'm just okay, wait a minute. Why is it like that, but yet it's confusing. Kickboxing and Muay Thai, their rules are the same in the sense of judges scoring it in a per round basis, but yet for MMA, where it makes a whole lot of sense, especially for grapplers, because you're at a disadvantage if that's how the system is going. Just what's going on here, whatever. But Nong-O versus Rodlek here, this is a case of Rodlek, he tried to... Okay, so Rodlek played the role of the sense of being the counter-striker here, and Nong-O was the one pressing forward and the action. And what Rodlek was doing, he was trying to go counterpunch and find some clean angles here, but Nong-O kept overwhelming him with these body shots, body punches, body kicks here. So it's more of a case of Rodlek trying to go find that one clean shot while Nong-O is overwhelming Rodlek with these body kicks. And he's like maximizing his reach more so than Rodlek is. And in the fight here, Nong-O ends up getting a right hand knockout. Not exactly, so it was a second round. The two are squaring off. Nong-O goes in for a left. He starts off with a left. Then from the left, he then goes for a right hand combination. Knocks out Rodlek. He goes onto the ground. And victory goes for Nong-O. Really strong performance right there. And then afterwards, he ended up getting the mic. He spoke some really good English, honestly. And challenged another Muay Thai champion to go fight against him for one. And sadly, I can't remember his exact name. But according to the commentary team, they're hyped up for it though, and we could see a champion versus champion bouts. And you know what? When it does happen, Nong-O really impressed the heck out of me from this bout here. I was excited watching the fight, and I'm pretty sure if I continue watching on more Nong-O fights, I'll be even more enthralled watching Muay Thai bouts as a whole. Though, one thing that does bother me about Muay Thai bouts is the sense that there is so much offense in these fights and so very little defense. I'm so used to, passive style, picking and choosing where the right shots are, and picking and choosing the right shots was the reason how Nong-O was able to win this bout here. But for the first round, it was like both of them trading off the same volume of strikes, and I would like to see from one championship in the general sense for both kickboxing, Muay Thai, and an MMA. Give us stats, please. Give us fight stats, because when Nong-O and Rodlek, when they're throwing up body kicks at such a high volume, it's hard by the end of the round to be like, okay, which of these two actually threw at a higher volume here? I know Nong-O did, but I have to rewatch it back and rewind myself and think through every exchange that happened for me to recognize that Nong-O was the one who ended up winning in the exchange there. Just give me some fight stats here. Which fighter won statistically first round? Which fighter won statistically second round? It makes the fights a lot more easier to digest. Alright, then we go on to the main events of One Championships collision course number 1 here. We have Roman Kryklia versus Andrei Soica. It's for the light heavyweight kickboxing championship. And this bout here was very fun. It was a very fun bout here where it essentially was Roman Kryklia. Oh my goodness, this guy is a beast. This guy is stoic, strong, lengthy. This dude is not a light heavyweight, to be perfectly honest with you. This guy is a proper heavyweight, pretending to be a light heavyweight, fighting against Andrei Soica, who also looks like he shouldn't be at light heavyweight, but he is. Alright then, Roman Kryklia here, what he did here was kind of how Stefan Struve fought, except with a lot more power, more than anything else. And it's also kickboxing. Honestly, if Stefan Struve were to fight just primarily as a kickboxer, he would go and wreck people. But Roman Kryklia, he's fighting with Andrei Soica here. Kryklia has such a significant reach and length advantage over Soica, so he's able to go throw out kicks, able to throw out long jabs. And Andrei Soica here, what he's doing, he wants to go fight in close. The only way Soica could have won this fight here is if he just pressured the heck out of Kryklia, and he made this to a bout where he'll be winning in the close range fights if he did some clinch work. And guess what? There were moments in this fight here where Kryklia was clinching with Soica. And they were clinching, and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a perfect opportunity for Soica to land in some good clean uppercuts from dirty boxing. But instead, Kryklia, he is deceptively fast. His clinch game was superior than Soica. He is so strong. He threw around Soica around in the clinching like he was a ham. Like he was absolutely nobody here. Throwing up these long strikes, throwing up from the good knees. He's just there was no scenario here in this fight where it looked like Soica could have won. Because if he fought outside or in the middle of the pockets of Krylenko's range, the guy would be pummeled. And if he overcommits, Krylenko's striking accuracy is so good that he found multiple good, accurate shots whenever Soica was trying to go and bum rush his way in. And so in this fight here, Roman Kryklia ended up winning the fight via unanimous decision. Soica was a brave dude, man. the crowd, which there was a small crowd in Singapore, they gave a standing ovation for Soica, man. This dude took a pummeling. He took a large amount of striking and shots to the head. He was definitely outclassed and overwhelmed by Roman Kryklia here. And I didn't think there was anything Andrei Soica could have done here. I don't think so. Because as a kickboxer, one of the things about kickboxing that Kryklia can do, unlike these other fighters for one championship, is that because he has this maximum huge advantage over his reach, he can be kind of reckless out there. He can throw in these high volumes of body kicks and like long jab and stuff, and he is so good in the clinching that he doesn't mind if it becomes a close range bout here, and he has nothing to be worried about by trying to go for these high volume shots, considering that there are no takedowns. So there are no takedowns because that's one thing that really stopped long, lengthy fighters in MMA, in the sense that, yeah, they're long, they're lengthy, but their grappling typically is really bad. And if they do grapple, it's like a unicorn, man. Like a good long grappler who's got these long arms, long legs, really good in the ground, good jiu-jitsu game, man. That is a proper unicorn. And you do see those in MMA, but they're very rare. And for a fighter like Kryklia here, who is long, he's lengthy, great striking accuracy, has power to him, much more bigger than any fighter he is going to fight at light heavyweight. This dude can go take advantage of anyone in the light heavy division. And here's the thing, I wouldn't be surprised if he were to go move up and fight a heavyweight and fight against Brandon Vera. And I would firmly believe that Roman Kryklia here could defeat Brandon Vera at heavyweights. And that's One Championship's Collision Course number 1. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after a short break here with the news brief and my overall summary of One Championship. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so, what I think about One Championship's Collision Course number 1 and Collision Course number 2. Overall, I thought Collision Course number 1 was a lot more of a fun show. It really was. And it wasn't like Collision Course number 2, where, by the way, there's proper false advertising here, where they said, hey man, Collision Course 2, we're going to have championship rounds, championship fights over here. And then there were no championships that are on the line for number 2 on Christmas Day, but there were 2 belts that were on the line for 1. I get what they're saying when they have like, we have champions fighting, and because apparently there are in kickboxing and Muay Thai, those fighters are currently champions for other organizations, and then they go fight for 1 championship. Like you're not specifically tied down to just 1 championship for just fighting there if you're representing kickboxing or Muay Thai. So the main events though, they were both very similar. For Collision Course 2, the main event, Santa ended up getting dominated in this fight here. Both main events showcased the champion or the top guy. Last Collision Course 2 had Collision Course number 2 had the main event of Santa being a number ranked 4th guy fighting against the number 2 ranked dude, and Santa ended up getting rocked and dominated throughout the entire fight. And in this scenario here, we have, including course number 1, we have Soica being dominated for the most part in this fight. And I guess maybe it's like more entertaining. Maybe that is. Because Soica, he was being, I guess I was more shocked and surprised and stunned of the durability and endurance of Soica. More so than Sana's durability. I didn't know. Like, it was, when I saw Sana, it's like, it was more of a sense of him being passive. And for Soica, it was more of a sense of him trying to go find openings, but he really can't do so because he's being pummeled by the champion here. And so overall, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching World Championships. There are stuff about it that does bother me, i.e. rankings and judges. But that's me trying to get away from everything I've been taught watching just MMA and boxing and applying like new concepts into this other organization. But now we go from that to the news brief portion of the podcast here, and I'm not the only one complaining about judges or have problems with judges here. So it is coming in from MMAfight.com. Dana White is not in favor of open scoring. Could lead to a lot of bad third rounds. This is coming in from the MMA Newswire. So UFC President Dana White is fine with having to wait for the judges' scores. Over the past couple of years, there has been a renewed interest in the introduction of open scoring to MMA, which would allow fighters and their teams to know what the scorecards would look like between rounds and adjust their strategies accordingly. In fact, the UFC has gone as far as to introduce the concept on a few recent cards in Kansas City, where the corners having a choice of whether they want the information or not. On one hand, though, knowing the scorer could motivate a fighter to be more aggressive in the final round if they see what they're doing against or even with their opponents. On the other hand, a fighter up to the cards may decide to play it safe as possible in the final round and deprive the fans of late drama. Speaking to the UFC on ESPN's Laura Sanko on ESPN+, in a virtual Q&A on Tuesday, White expressed the latter viewpoints. He goes in to go say, if a guy knows that he's up 2 rounds and you're a professional fighter, you can absolutely stay away from a guy for an entire round and make the fight completely horrible, White said. If you already know you've got 2 rounds in the bag, guarantee if you saw your score up there, all you have to do is stay away from the guy for the next 5 minutes. That makes the 3rd round bad. During White's lengthy tenure with the UFC, he's seen all kinds of close calls. He goes on to say, when we do the fights, I have no idea who I think won or lost or whatever, but when I'm standing there with the belt, I don't know what Bruce Buffer is going to say. He doesn't tell me anything. The judges tell him, the commission do their thing, they tell him, and I'm standing there waiting to hear so. So I'm just as blown away as the fans are, and I agree with you. It completely takes away the anticipation of who won the fight. Despite White's oft-repeated saying of never leave to the hands of the judges, for now he is content to maintain the status quo. White is as vocal as anyone when it comes to voicing his displeasure of the verdict. He's going to say, it's never going to be perfect. There are always going to be fights that absolutely drive you insane and piss you off. Blow your bets. There will always be these other things that are up in the fight business. At the end of the day, watching the fight and waiting for the results are fun. And yes, there is like anxiety to it though, and being like, oh man, who actually won this fight? Who? And I understand where Dana White is coming from, but I still am upset over this idea. Like, when will there ever be a time, just tell me, when will there ever be a time where you can see a judge's decision, and Dana will be like, yup, that's how it should be? I'm not really sure. When will there ever be a time where Dana White will be like, you know what? There's nothing wrong leaving it to the judges because they know what they're doing. It's pretty much accepted that according to these judges here, and these judges are mostly boxing judges. They're not MMA judges. They're not mixed martial arts judges. They're not even judges who have experience judging UFC fights. For the most part, they're boxing judges. Which is confusing to me because that means they're not qualified to properly judge a fight. To properly judge an MMA fight. And here's what I believe. I believe open scoring is a good thing. I know what Dana White said. He's saying, well, if a guy is up 2 rounds or 3 rounds, then what's the point of that fighter, being aggressive? And here's the thing, though. there are many fights that we've seen where the fighters are up 2 rounds and they know they're up by 2 rounds and they continue to be passive, but the fighter who is down 2 rounds, they're not being overly aggressive because they're just hoping, like, you know what, maybe, just maybe, I actually might have won a round or 2. With open scoring, you're just validating the fighter who is ahead and be like, okay, no, I know I really am ahead. And you're adding this much pressure onto the fighter who is losing to go do more. Because Dana White, what he's saying the fighter who is ahead, he'll be more passive. But the fighter who is down will be a lot more aggressive. And I feel like if they know that the score is down, there will be a lot more pressure. I think there'll be a lot more anxiety. I think there's going to be this sense of, like, agency for fighters who are down, because it upsets me all the time, for my casual friends who barely watch MMA, that they say, I don't get it. They always say, I don't get it. I don't get it. These fighters are obviously losing these rounds. Why don't they just, like, be a lot more aggressive and try something in the final rounds here? And I keep telling them, well, they don't know what the scoring is. And my friend replied, it's pretty obvious who's winning this fight. And I don't know, understand this. The cornermen, these cornermen for MMA fighters, I know I'm going past beyond the judges here. But the cornermen should know how these fights are going, alright then? There's like a bunch of you dudes. There's like 3, 5, 6 of you guys all hovering your fighter there. And whenever the camera pans over to you guys, the corner crew don't really say anything all that interesting or thoughtful. They say typically the same stuff. Hey man, you're doing good there. Work on your combinations. Alright then, breathe. Alright then, you got this, man. You're the champ. You got this. Get there, win the fight. Alright then. Or, if they know they're obviously losing, they'll be like, hey man, you gotta go out there and knock him out, man. You gotta go out there and knock him out. It'd be a lot more difference if the corner crew knew what the scoring was, and then their fighter comes over and is like, okay dude, you're being completely destroyed, and that's not my opinion, that's facts. The facts on this paper say you are being destroyed. You are a loser. You are a loser going to the 3rd round. If you don't go out there and win it all in the 3rd round, you're a loser because you're coming into the 3rd round as a loser. Alright then? Like, you're pressuring, you're adding agency to the fighter here. And what is if Robin, like, if there was open scoring cards here for, like, fighters like Tyron Woodley and Robbie Lawler, 2 fighters who obviously don't care, 2 fighters who they say they care, they got UFC contracts, but it's obvious by the way how they fight, they don't really care. If someone were to show them the scorecards and be like, yeah dude, no, you're not as good as you think you are, alright, look at the scorecards, you're losing. It will really separate, and I think it will damage a lot of fighters' reputations. It's going to separate which of these fighters are the ones who will go out there and put it all on the line, and which of these fighters just don't care. You're putting their reputation at stake if you know what the scoring is, and these fighters know what to do, and they don't do anything. Alright then? And yes, it is a weird, like, mental disconnect if you're to go tell a fighter, hey, you're up by a couple rounds here, you can go fight, you can go change your style a wee bit actually. I get it. But all I want, personally, would be like, okay, if we're not going to have open scoring, if we're not going to do that, let's have judges, after the fight, at least explain their logical reasonings as to why they got to the verdict like they did. Alright then? And it's not asking much. It really isn't though. Because what are we missing if we don't have that? Alright then? These UFC shows are like 2.5, 3 hour long shows. The one championship closing course show I just saw right now had like 8 fights. Not including the pre-show stuff. And it was 3 hours long. It was a 3 hour, very long show with under 10 fights. And you know what? For Invicta, for Bellator, we can reduce the amount of time we put into these shows of like videos, alright then? Like, and here's the thing. We've seen the promo packages several times. We see it several times in the pre-show. We see it right before the show starts, and then we see the pre-show package right before each fight. There's so much effort being put into these videos. We're having these commentators have discussions that don't really mean anything. They really don't. Like, yeah, there's only so much I can hear about Michael Bisping's opinion on some fighters. I get it, he's a former champion. But, like, you can dedicate the pre-show, that's what the pre-show is for. That's what the pre-show is for. Reduce the amount of talking, reduce the amount of these video packages, because I would like to see these judges give reasons. Because it's always upset. I'm always upset. Fighters are always upset. Fans are always upset. Commentary team is upset. Dana White, he himself is upset. And it's not right to be like, well, we just have to accept that the judges suck. No, we don't. We don't have to accept that the judges suck. Why can't it be, we have to accept that whatever the judges scored it's the right choice? Because these judges are qualified officials who know what they're talking about. No, that's not it. Open scoring, not going to happen. Fights going off, fights being based on accumulation, I firmly stand against that. I hope one championship goes against that. I hope Dana White does something about this. He's complained at a yearly basis about judges. Everyone complains about judges at a yearly basis, though. I understand the UFC doesn't select their own judges, but the Nevada State Athletic Commission, or whatever athletic commission is going out there, whenever they see MMA fight going in, make sure they hire judges who know what they're doing. I don't know, maybe it's cheaper for them. That's what I'm speculating. Maybe it's a lot more cheaper. It is a lot more convenient for them to be like, alright then, we don't want to go through the process of hiring these like 20, 30 judges out there who know what they're doing and who know what they're talking about as it pertains to MMA. Let's go have this one guy here who's been judging boxing fights for 16 years because we're being cost efficient, we're not spending that much money, we don't have to retrain people anymore. Alright then, it's just convenient for us. That's what I believe is happening here. I think it's conveniency. I think Dana White, he doesn't want to change his scoring because it's not convenient for him to do so. Because he has to go put in a lot more extra effort. And there's a lot of things going on in Dana White's head. There's a lot of things going on in the UFC's brass's head that I think, as it pertains a priority, changing the scoring, changing the judges, those things are not priorities. Same with the gloves. Like, changing the gloves, not a priority. Changing the allotted time between, video commercials, people talking, and the actual fights, that's not there in the priorities. There are changes that need to be done for the UFC that are not on the top of their priorities right now. It's understandable. I don't run the organization, but I would like it if there was at least some little changes that can make the UFC product just a little bit more digestible. That's all I'm asking for. You are listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after this short break here. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. Let's continue on with the news brief here. This is coming in from MMAFire.com here, being written in by Jen Mashu. Running reports Dan Hooker on Michael Chandler. He's going to say, I'm going to break the new toy real quick. Over the weekend, the UFC finally announced an opponent for Michael Chandler, and it is against Dan Hooker. And I'm thinking here, Dan Hooker, number 6 ranked guy right now for the UFC? Really? Dang. So he goes on to say, I think they were trying to get other people to take the fight, and what was the holdup? I heard really early on that they were trying to get Gaethje to take it, and then when Dana announced the fight, Dana announced we're trying to get Oliveira to take the fight, but he didn't take it, so now Hooker's taking it. And the people asking me, oh, so it's a short notice? Nah, bruv, I've been in camp for a while. I'm coming in ready for this. I got approached about the fight. a while back. He goes on to say, I think they just wanted to get him to a title shot as quickly as possible. Anyone that's been following the sport for a good amount of time knows the danger lies in time. Father Time in the sport is not your friend, you know what I mean? They want him to come in and look like a man, so if he comes in, he whitewashes a top 5, top 4, top 3 opponent, then people will start going, title shot, title shot, title shot, because like 95% of people that watch it are lazy. They'll only watch the highlight reel in the build-up to the fight, so they'll be like, whoa, he's a former champ in another organization. He came in and beat a top 5 guy, now he's fighting for a title? They're not gonna actually go back and watch his fights. There's like 5% of people that really study the sport and really watch the sport and really do research on the sport. The danger lies in getting to the top 5. If you were to put him against someone else who's come up to the UFC like a top 50, then a top 30, then a top 20, then a top 15, then his chances of losing skyrocket exponentially. So the quicker they can get him a title fight, the quicker they could market and sell him. So to me, they're going to give me the new toy. I'm going to break the new toy real quick. They invested a whole lot of money to get this guy out of his contract and get him over to the UFC, and they're going to throw him with me, who's like a bad stylistic matchup, and I'm going to break the toy in 5 minutes. I can't say I feel sorry for him. He goes on to say, they showed that by putting him as the backup for the title, how much stock the UFC puts in on him, they made sure that he's on the Conor McGregor undercard. So these are 2 of the biggest fights for the lightweight division, and they're putting him as close as they can. But you know what? After I beat him, I'm going to be back onto the mix. Alright, so Dan Hooker, Michael Chandler, that is a close fight. Without a doubt, if I was on I'm going to make a prediction right now. The betting odds is going to be like lenient towards 150, 160 on Dan Hooker. Yeah, on Bouncer. Dan Hooker, based on his last fight, it is hard for me to imagine Michael Chandler defeating this guy in the first round. I predict it's going by decision. Yeah, I say it's going to go by split decision in favor of Hooker. That's not me discrediting Michael Chandler, but I always say you're as good as a fighter as you were in your last performance, and Dan Hooker's last performance for the UFC was a lot more better than Michael Chandler's last performance in Bellator. And I said no, Michael Chandler, he won those last fights, but he lost that last major fight he had like 2 years ago. So because of that fight here, and when you look at the toughness of Dan Hooker, it's hard for me to go be like, all right then, this is a wash. I don't think it's going to be a wash. This could possibly be the best fight of the night. As a case for doing that, it's going to be a really fun fight. But in this fight here, I doubt even Dan Hooker will knock out Michael Chandler in the first round. This will be a close bout that could end probably by decision. So this is coming in also from MMAfighting.com. The business of MMA. Anthony Pettis on managing fighters. Conor McGregor makes 257 proper and more. This is coming in from Damon Martin. Anthony Pettis has spent most of his life in martial arts in some form or fashion. He was 5 when he started practicing Taekwondo, and his passion for martial arts only grew as he got older. According to Pettis, he's advised fighters about their careers behind the scenes for several years, but now he's actually using that knowledge to build his own firm. He goes on to say, honestly, I've been doing it for a while now, just not officially, with my younger brother's career. A lot of fighters at Ruffle Sports and at Rufus Sports, and we kind of have a factory for building great fighters there. Pettis sold MMA fighting ahead of his most recent win over Alex Moreno in the UFC. I started fighting in a Harley-Davidson dealership in Milwaukee. That was my first fight all the way up to a UFC world title. So we all have the pieces of the puzzle in Milwaukee, and that's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I just didn't officially announce it. As a fighter, Pettis has worked with numerous top fighters, including Uriah Faber, Cody Garbrandt, and Paige Van Zandt. You're going to say, there are some great managers out there. This isn't something where I'm like, yo, there's horrible managers. It's more, I know what needs to be done. I know what fighters need to be at all different stages in their careers. I'm doing this. We have 80 guys that we signed from my first combine. It's more of a fight family. I want these guys to be part of something that's not like, here's a negotiated contract, go get ready, we'll talk to you about your next negotiation. We're doing Zoom meetings. It has to be Zoom because of COVID. But on mindset stuff, fighters, they have experience, talk to my athletes, accounting, teaching them how to make LLCs, paying themselves salaries, all the stuff that I had to learn on my own. Honestly, that I'm giving to these guys right now, the jump. So Pettis says he'll still have a management team for his career, including the contract he just inked to join the PFL roster. but he's hoping to build a roster of fighters at Showtime Sports Entertainment, group that features homegrown talent that can grow from time to time as an athlete to starting out to a momentous occasion, like signing their first contract with the UFC. He goes on to continue saying, it kind of just all plays all together. So the fight promotion, I'll have a place to build up my talent, give them the right fights, and then hopefully get them to the bigger shows. I've been guiding my brother Sergio's career, Sergio Pettis, since it started, and I think I know what fighters need. I've been with numerous management companies, all different stages of my career, and I feel like there's a spot that I can give back to these fighters just a little more. Without getting into crazy details, finances, mental stuff, mental health, the right fights for the right time, and the ability to get on to big shows. That's what he wants. So, he's simultaneously going to do a wee little bit of both here. He's going to go and try to be the manager. He's going to run his own company. I wouldn't say he's like solely running his own company, but he's going to go play a part into running a company that's under his brand. And he's still going to be a fighter for PFL. And you know what? Good on him. I can guarantee right now, PFL offered him a bigger contract than whatever contract he was given in the UFC, because where he was at the UFC when he fought his last fight for his contract, he was going to be stuck as German. I do not see him at all competing at all for the top 5 in the lightweight division. I just don't see that happening. And for PFL, you saw how they build up Kayla Harrison. You see how they go and promote Fabricio Verdum. They are really high on these fighters, and they are going to go, I won't be surprised if they try to build a foundation from Anthony Pettis to become a huge star for PFL. So, just like Khabib, Anthony Pettis, he wants to run his own company, he wants to go push others to go succeed in the world of mixed martial arts, and I respect that. I really do. In the weird carny world of MMA, we got some fighters out there selfishly doing whatever they want to do in order to go make money in their business, and there are some fighters who want to go help out others to become successful. So whatever type of fighter Anthony Pettis wants to be, I'm happy for it. I'm happy that he wants to go be the one who helps out other fighters' careers. And the world of mixed martial arts is expanding. It really is. PFL is getting a lot more bigger. I love Invicta FC giving a platform for female fighters out there. And it's been shown, it's been proven that people who fight at Invicta are pretty much being given a ticket for the UFC or even compete at Bellator. There have been a lot of fighters, known fighters, who fight for the UFC who are now expanding their horizons. And I think right now, as an MMA fighter, everything's going up right now. The direction's going up in terms of finances, which is a huge thing because a lot of fighters don't make that much money in mixed martial arts. So, you know what? Be part of an agency. Go and learn as much as you can from these veterans, from these fighters who've competed at the big shows. Learn from them. And you know what? Khabib, he's helping out others. Anthony Pettis, he's helping out others. And I like that the MMA community is doing their part in assisting and helping others to go succeed, especially the young fighters. Alright, I just saw this headline right now, and I have to talk about it. So this is coming in by SBNation.com, written in by Jesse Holland. Warning, Dana White has a surprise, quote, surprise, for the MFers who illegally stream UFC 257. I gotta see this. Alright then, so UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship, in less than 3 weeks away from their first pay-per-view of 2021. It'll be taking place on January 23 in Abu Dhabi, UFC 257, headlined by the lightweight rematch between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. Huge fights. If you're planning to illegally stream the event, try not to brag about it on Dana White's social media accounts, because the UFC president has a little something in store for the MFers who don't want to pay for this month's MMA extravaganza. And then we go to the on Instagram. Some person here says, from this coming from, oh my god, a guy named Israel Gutian says, can't wait to pirate the heck out of this. Thanks, Dana. I'm excited. Dana replies to Israel saying, and I can't wait to patch you. Got a surprise for you MFers this year. LMAO. White has been going to war with internet pirates for over a decade, which has led to the seizure of host websites as well as the prosecution for dozens of offenders, and I guess now's a good time to mention that it will soon be considered a felony to operate a pirated streaming service. Alright then, I like to see Dana White try. I really do. And this leads to an old link. Back in 2014, UFC shuts down an illegal pay-per-view stream seizes website records and threatens to prosecute viewers. Alright then, letting you know, there are hundreds of streaming sites out there. I know people who go stream NFL games, college games, basketball games, MMA fights. There are so many out there, and it's been a discussion that's been going on for a very long time as to, heck, why aren't these pirated sites like going, be taken down? It takes years for these sites to be taken down, and it's just hard for me to believe it. It really is. It's hard for me to believe that Dana White, the UFC, it's a big company within the spectrum of MMA, but still a small company within the spectrum of, sports as a whole. And so, for me, from my perspective, it's hard to see UFC, they're able to shut down a site, but there are many sites out there that do pirated streams. There are people out there who pirate video games. And you know what? There are people out there who pirate movies, TV shows. It is so big at this point in 2021, and since so many people are so tech savvy, it's hard to think whatever Dana White's saying is legitimate now. It really is. Because I still remember one time when somebody did an interview with Dana White, and he says, because 2014, I think there's a time period that somebody hacked into, someone from 4chan hacked into UFC's Twitter and started posting some really inappropriate, random stuff. And Dana White did an interview where he's like, guess what, you internet basement nerds? We're gonna come for you. I'm not afraid of the internet. I'm not afraid of those loser nerds from 4chan. Hey, listen here, internet. I'm not afraid of you, internet. He's talking about the internet as if it's a person. Because here's the thing, the internet, you can't talk to the internet because the internet isn't a little thing you actually interact. No, it's weird. It's such a weird thing. And he's like, Dana White talks about the internet the same way my dad talks about the internet. It's that person is the internet and I'm taking you down, or the internet is watching us. No, that's not how it works. So do I expect some sites to be shut down? Probably, yeah. But then more sites are going to pop up. It's nothing new. This has been going on for years at this point, and I highly doubt that somehow Dana White and the UFC are going to end pirated streaming. If the NBA, the NFL, and these other major organizations that are a lot more bigger than the UFC aren't able to do so, I don't think the UFC can. And that will bring us to a close for today's podcast. You have been an awesome, awesome audience. Go out there and try to get into One Championships if you can. You can watch on YouTube. They post all their events via Bleacher Reports out the day right after the event happened. And also Bellator is also making an exerted effort into putting out their full show events the day afterwards. And so getting into these other organizations is pretty easy, and it's right there. It's really available. All I gotta do is put the effort in and go out and watch it. With that being said, all I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.